Hello. This is going to be a quick overview on how to use the IKFK switcher script. To install this, what you got to do is grab the file that you downloaded and drag and drop it into your script editor. From there, what you can do is you can either save it to your shelf or directly execute it. So that's how you install it. You'll be greeted with this pop-up window. So this is basically the script, and what it does is it applies a temporary IK or FK setup, and your animations are preserved. So for example, here I have a simple animation on the arms. So if I have an FK setup, like here on the arms, what I can do is, just to give a brief demo, I'll select the three FK controls in order of parent to child, and then I'm going to click this button, and what it's going to do is it's going to apply an IK setup on top of that existing FK setup. And as you can see, the animations are preserved as well. Now, depending on the size of your rig, you might have to adjust the size of these controls that get created. So that's why you have this slider right here. The animations are preserved, and this works just the same when you're trying to go from IK to FK. But here you have to select the pull vector first, then the IK control, and hit apply. It's important to select these original controls in order for the script to run correctly. So pull vector, then IK control, and when you're going from FK to IK, you need to select from parent to child. So let's apply this IK setup once again. Now, to go back to what you originally had, you have to select one control from the setup and hit the delete setup button, and it'll bring you back. Say for example, maybe you made some changes to this animation. I don't know, I'm just gonna do a slight change right there. Obviously there's a flicker, but now when I select, you can select either one of these controls and you hit delete setup. When it goes back to FK, I'm still gonna have this change that I made to the animation, so it's preserved. I'm just gonna backtrack a bit. These three buttons are the most important ones from the whole setup. Now, over here you have a few extra settings that you can mess around with. One of them obviously being the size of the temporary controls that you can adjust. But also, here you have preserve animation, which if I was to tick off and then I try to apply the setup, it's going to apply it, but there's no animations. So the way this can be used is, I'm just going to apply this right here. Say for example, you have the setup, you make a change that you don't like or whatever, and you're not happy with it, you want to go back to how it previously was, back to your original setup. You can tick this off, and when you delete it, when it goes back, it's like it's gonna forget whatever changes you made. So that's there. Hide controls is so that when you apply the setup, it hides the original controls. It's turned on by default just for more clarity. By the way, when you hover over one of these features, you can see there's like a small description of what each feature does, just in case you want to reference, you know, just so you can see in what ways you can utilize these. So remove static channels. What this is I think it's best if I showcase this here. So let me see. Just gonna open up the graph editor real quick. So the controls are there. Okay, so say for example on the elbow, I have this rotate X, which is if you look at the channel box, it's basically zeroed out. Same with rotate Z. So before I apply this setup, I can tick this on, and then when I hit apply, if I go to this elbow control, you can see those static channels were removed. By static channels, it means redundant curves that have no fluctuations in their keyframes, like they're just all the same value. So this feature ticking this on removes it for more clarity. Apply Q reducer. What this does is you can mess around with the intensity a bit. So I can set it to 3, and then when it bakes the animation, it tries to eliminate as many keys as possible while still trying to preserve what animation was there. Obviously, the more intense it gets, the higher number you add, the less likely it is to precisely carry the animation over to the temporary setup. So just keep that in mind. I think that's it for these settings. Now, last thing is this extra options here, which when you go here, this is so that there's animators, for example, who they don't want to have to go to this UI every time they want to run one of these pieces of code. So this extra feature here allows you to isolate the code here that goes from FK to IK. It allows you to isolate that code. So if you have no selection, hold up. If you have no selection in the scene, you can choose either of these three. I'm just going to pick the first one. If I hit generate code, it's going to give me the code, and then I can I'm just gonna, let me see. I'm gonna put it up here at the top as a Python script. Now, when I run it, it's gonna give me this. It says incorrect number of controls selected. I have to select 3 FK controls, and then I can run it. So that's what that does. Now, I can go one step further and be more precise with it. If I select these 3 controls first and then I hit generate code with this first option selected, I can bring this in here, and now it's basically the selection gets stored into this code. So now anytime I want to apply the setup on this particular, say for like the left arm, I don't have to go ahead and select these every time. So it just gives you the ability to be more precise if you happen to be using the same setup over and over again on the same spot. This is another option. And obviously the same goes for IK to FK and delete setup as well. What I can do is I can say, so the setup is applied. I can grab this. It's selected. I can generate code. Bring this over here, and now if I click it, I don't have to select this first and then hit delete setup. The selection is stored and it automatically brings it back to the original state, and I can just jump back and forth between them just like that. One important thing to mention is that these options here that you have, at the time you hit generate code, these values get stored inside of this code that gets generated. So if you don't want any of these applied to this setup, be mindful when doing this because they will get stored. Because right now, for example, the Q reducer got applied to this setup, and maybe you don't want that, so just keep that in mind. That's basically it for the script. If you have any feedback, I think I'll drop my socials in the description, so just reach out. Let me know if there's any bugs or maybe extra features, quality of life features that you want added. This script is meant to work with every rig, but there's obviously not 100% guarantee that it will. Some rigs are just structured in a way to where it makes it really hard for this to be executed, but yeah, that's all.